What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the format because with the release of a new ban list and the release of Darkwing Blast being very soon, we are going to expect some changes. Now unfortunately I'm pretty sure the ban list left a lot to be expected, and we know that the format is not going to change as drastically as we had wished for, because we know that tier laments are still going to be the best deck. The banning of Fairytale Snow, well, it was good, it was definitely not enough, and that's obvious for Karami's part because we all know how good tier laments are going to become very soon with the release of the Ishizu cards, because during November we can expect tier 0 format. I mean, all the other decks, if they don't stand a chance against tier laments right now, then what can we expect in a month from now, where we have these broken cards that are going to make the deck more powerful than ever before? But again, we can see exactly how the format is going to shift, because there have been a few changes. Some decks got a lot weaker, some decks now have some more breathing room because they had some really good bad matchups against other decks like Sprite, which Sprite got a huge hit in the ban list. So let's see exactly how the new ban list and the new set are going to affect the meta. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the list. Number 10, Heroes. Now Heroes did get back Fusion Destiny to 3, and I'm pretty sure that the only card left in the Heroes for the ban list is Malicious, and judging from how Malicious has been in the previous times, I doubt Konami plans on making that mistake like for the 5th time in a row and bring Malicious back 3, and this is why they printed Denier, so Heroes would have a way to get multi copies of Malicious and other decks wouldn't. So I think this is the most powerful that Heroes are going to be ban list wise. It's going to get new support in Crystal Revenge, and Ian Shuffle is going to be a really powerful card for the deck, so you can expect Heroes to become more powerful than now. But even the way they are right now, I feel like they're good enough for the 10th spot, and the reason is Dark Lord destroys tier elements. We all know how banishing effects like D-Shifter and stuff can destroy tier elements, then Heroes can make it consistently. The problem with the deck is that it does lose to a couple cards that a lot of people are playing in the meta, like Super Poly and Dark Ruler No More. Well, while the deck does have a way to counter cards like this in the form of Dark Angel, unfortunately Dark Angel in this particular format doesn't do anything, because if you give it to a tier element player, it's just going to become fodder for Curious. If you give it to a Sprite player, it's just going to be linked away for Elf. So yeah, it's a card that you don't really want to play in this format, but it would be able to save you from those other troublesome cards that kill the deck like Super Poly and Dark Ruler No More. But again, Heroes, if your opponent doesn't have an out, then they're not going to be able to play, but there are a lot of outs, and this is why it's only at number 10 in the list. Number 9, Ignis. Now, Ignis and Marine says they're very very similar, and I was considering which one I should put in the list, but I ultimately went with this particular deck just because it does have ways to go for towers more consistently than Marines, because Marines cannot go for towers with one card combo. It needs some more extenders in the hand, but this deck with just one cheat sheet can go into the full combo for the towers monster, and then if you back it up with a couple hand traps and more interruptions like Dunmari in the graveyard, then you can have a lot of chances, because tier laments, if they don't play any link monsters, their only way to play around something like this is summon a Starving Venom with the effects of Super Poly or something like that with their own monsters. But they do play access code, but this is why you should be trying to make the arrival 6000, and if you can accomplish that, then there is no way you're going to lose unless they can summon Starving Venom by using their own monsters with Super Poly. But if you keep a negation like a Dunmari for that, then you're fully covered to win the game. So yeah, this deck does have a win condition against a lot of decks. Many decks do not have a single out for an uneffect monster like this, so yeah, this is why we're putting Ignis at number 9. But again, the deck is very fragile to a lot of hand traps. It can feel a little bit awkward playing in a format where sometimes you play against hand traps and sometimes people don't play any hand traps and they just play power spells. But right now we don't really know for sure exactly how the format is going to unfold, so I'm putting this at number 9 for now. Number 8, Branded Despia. Now Despia is a deck that did not get hit in the ban list. It shouldn't have, and thankfully it didn't, because we were expecting something to get hit just because of how the deck used to be, and Konami usually hits decks even though sometimes they're just being power crept by just because they used to be meta, they hit them anyway. Thankfully it didn't happen, and Branded Despia, again, even though it lost Snow, it doesn't matter too much because the deck can use a lot of other cards in order to make big boards. Big boards against a lot of decks like Sprite are very problematic, because being able to summon so many 3k and 2500 beaters against Sprite, especially now that they got crippled by the ban list, is going to be very good. So against that matchup, you're going to have a free ride with this particular deck. Against tier elements, you can still use the tools against them by using cards like Super Poly and other stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like Branded Despia, even though it's not the best spot right now, it's still a really decent deck to be able to combat the meta, and this is why it's deserving to be at the number 8 on the list. Number 7, Sword Soul. Now, I mentioned before that in this format, we don't know yet if people are going to choose to play hand traps or power spells. Now, in the event that we choose to play hand traps, Sword Soul, I feel like it's one of the best decks that you can do this with, because being able to play conservatively, summon big synchro monsters by using like only 1 and 2 cards, and then have a handful of hand traps in order to be able to combat your opponent, it means that Sword Soul is going to be a deck that you can basically put in hand traps to be able to combat the meta. If tier elements are the best deck, then you can main deck 3 copies of DD Crow and stuff like that, and with the addition of all those synchro monsters you can have on the field on top of the hand traps, then Sword Souls are a deck that not only can they disrupt your opponent very, very well, but can also grind, because during the grind game, you just need a top deck of a Moye or a Taya if you have just one Wyrm in the hand or the graveyard, and boom, you have a monster on the field that can basically give you another Surge, a Negation, and all those big bodies. So yeah, Sword Soul, again, it's not as powerful as it used to be, but still a really good deck. Number 6, Exosisters. Now, Exosisters is one of the decks in the ban list that we're going to talk about that main decks D-Shifter, and we all know that any deck that can main deck D-Shifter has an edge over a lot of decks, because when you draw D-Shifter, you basically get a free pass against decks like Laments, and that's why it has become so annoying being able to see this card so consistently, because players that play this card, for some reason, they open it every single time, and Exosister is one of those decks. There is one more deck that is going to be able to play this card, but Exosister, the problem with the deck is that it does sometimes rely a little bit on your opponent being able to move cards from the graveyard, but again, in a format with Laments, you don't care about that, because if they don't move anything from the graveyard, they're not going to play, so you don't really care. You're going to get your effects off anyway, which is why Exosister is really good in this format, but this deck is format dependent. You're going to see this deck show up sometimes when the format calls for it, and when other decks like Sprite, for example, or similar decks become the best deck in the future, then this deck is going to disappear whatsoever, because it's not going to be able to counter what it needs to counter, which is the graveyard. So for now, it's a really good, which is deserving to be at the number 6 slot, but this deck can easily go up and easily go down, depending on the format. Number 5, Rika. Now, Rika is a deck that we never expected to do well. In the WCQ, it managed to pick up a win, and this deck, ever since then, has seen a lot of play, and for good reason. This deck does have a lot of break my board potential, because the amount of monsters and the plant support that plants have make it possible for all these cards. Sun Avalon is an engine that with just one card you can do a lot, and all those other strategies that you can use in order to make powerful monsters. But the good thing about a deck like this is that it does not lose to Mystic Mine because of Glamour. You can tribute your own monster with a spell card and then clear your board, and Mystic Mine is going to blow itself up, and we all know that Mystic Mine for some reason did not get hit, so we have to play around it for one more format. Hopefully it's the last time, but you never know with Konami. But yeah, this deck is a deck that can do it very, very consistently because of Glamour, and yeah, being able to play around Mystic Mine with your the part of your engine inherently makes it so that you don't have to main deck outs like Laments have to main deck cards like Fusion Substitute or Galaxy Cyclone. This deck can do it on its own, which is why it's really good against Mystic Mine, and it's a really good card. It's a really good deck altogether to be able to play in the form. Number 4, Flanders. Now, another deck that does play D-Shifter, and we all know that this is more annoying than Exosister just because of the way Flanders play, being able to set up stuff like Barrier Statue, being able to go for M-Pen to lock the attack position monsters, and also being able to play Featherstorm in some side decks, which is going to completely shut down your opponent's turn. Maybe the moment Laments become so powerful with Ishizu stuff, maybe it will be the time to main deck even Featherstorm in the deck if you want to have a chance, because if you go second, you're screwed anyway if you don't draw shifters, so at least when you go first, you give yourself some more chances of drawing another powerful card that is going to win you the game right away. So Flanders does have the tools to battle the format. It's a deck that a lot of people enjoy playing just because it's the anti-meta part. It's just like how it used to be with True Draco, where people didn't really like the meta, so they played Floodgates with True Draco in order to be a fight, and this is basically what Flanders is. Even though it doesn't play any of those generic Floodgates that we see, it does have its own Floodgates, and the deck does feel a lot of True Draco-ish because of the extra normal summons. So yeah, D-Shifter is a reason why this deck is winning. It's decent on its own, and Featherstorm is another card that people can consider even in the main deck right now to be able to fight Laments when they go first. Number 3, Mech. Now, when it comes to decks that build boards that give you not only interruption but extra advantage, then Mech I feel like it's the best one when it does that, because being able to set up Heat Leo and Hit Soul with Masquerade and all those other traps that will give you a special summon 3 from the grave and an instant Xyz means that you're not only going to be able to disrupt your opponent, you're going to be able to draw cards every single turn during your own turn, during your opponent's turn, and a lot of people don't really know what this deck does still, because it's a deck that you see a lot, but not to the point that you are going to sit down to play the deck yourself to exactly know what the deck does. So you're going to catch a lot of people off guard with this deck. Sometime it's going to happen where people will finally try to realize what these cards do, and they're going to sit down and read the cards. But until that happens, then Mech is still going to be a deck that your opponent will not know what to hit when they try to hand trap you, and this is why it's another deck that not only does have the element of surprise, unlike a deck like Flanders, which I'm pretty sure everyone by far knows exactly what they do at this point. So yeah, Mech, it's still fairly new, and this is why it has a lot of edge against the other decks, because people don't know what play against it, and it's a deck that can do a lot with a few cards. It does have a lot of extenders, it does have a lot of draw power with Heat Soul, and it's a deck that can keep up, it can break boards, it can make boards, it can play a lot of hand traps or a lot of power spells, and yeah, it's a deck that I feel like it's decent to be put at the number 3 slot on the list. Number 2, Sprite Runic. Now, Sprite, unfortunately, it cannot be played on its own anymore, because without Toad, it doesn't have a really good interruption that it aims for every single time. But the thing is, the Sprite engine is just so powerful on its own that if you splash it with other decks, like Runic here for example, it can be be really good. There are other variants that you can use, maybe even the Tri-Brigade variant is decent, but I feel like Runic is the one that we're going to see the most moving forward, and that's because it does have really good synergy with the level 2 fusion monsters, being able to play all those spells that give you interruption and also give you breaking board potential, along with the Sprite engine, which does have infinite extenders and infinite pluses, and also it gives you interruptions, makes it so that this version of the deck right now, it's the only one that I feel like has a chance of surviving format because of the banning of Toad. If Toad wasn't banned, then yes, Pure Sprite would have been an option, but without Toad, I just don't feel like Pure Sprite can do anything, so you have to splash it with something if you want to play Sprite still, and I feel like Runics are the best thing you can splash it with right now. And to nobody's surprise, at the number 1 slot, we have Tier Laments, and Tier Laments right now, you can see a lot of variants, but I just still feel like the Danger variant for now is the best one. In 1 month from now, when we get the Ishizu cards, then yeah, Ishizu Tier Laments are going to become not only the best variant of Tier Laments, but potentially a Tier 0 deck that no other deck will have even the remote chance of playing against it, just because we all know how powerful these effects are. They give you interruption, they give you extra milling, they give you access to cards like Baron, which is very powerful with cards like Diviner. Even cards like Herald of Orange like to have extra hand traps that can also help play at turn 0 because you can mill cards if you discard it with Ajido or Kelbeck. So yeah, we all know these cards, how powerful they're going to be. This is why cards like Necomanic King you've seen to get reprint the OTS, because it's a troll way of trying to counter this deck, but it's not going to work regardless. But yeah, these Shizu cards are going to push this deck off the top, so we can expect that the format is going to get a lot worse. Hopefully Konami does something about it, but considering what they did in the previous ban list and how long it took them to make a ban list, we can expect that we're going to be in this format for quite some time, so we better get used to it and try to find something that can counter it. And this is why a lot of people are going to play decks like Exorcist and Flanders, because these are the decks that are meant to counter Tier Laments. But all those other decks that I mentioned do have a chance right now, and will still have a slight chance against them in the future as well. It's just going to become more and more difficult depending on how many broken cards the deck plays, because we all know that the bestial cards that came out in Darkwing Blast right now, they're going to be played in Tier Laments as well. They did get a new fusion monster in that set as well, so the deck only gets stronger. So it's going to become really tough to fight the deck, but we're going to try our best if we don't feel like playing Tier Laments ourselves. So yep, that's the list, guys. Comment down below your thoughts about the upcoming format, if you think there are other decks that have a chance against the top decks, and if you think that other decks that I mentioned here are better or worse and did not really deserve to be in the slot I mentioned. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming videos, and we'll see you next time.